We won't wait for the last one, so let's start. This is actually a big final session for today, and is dedicated to reputation. On the one hand, we all understand probably what this is, but as for business, think the reputation of each country in this or that way is associated with the brands, with business. The US, Coca-Cola, Tesla, British Petroleum would be, okay, IKEA in Sweden, and of course businesses are responsible for the good reputation of the country. There is also the reverse side, when the reputation of the country already influences the business. Just agree, like what means made in Italy or made in China, that's different. And actually, does the reputation of the country prevent you or help you? So in this way, how should the business behave? Should it help forming this good name, or should it simply invest into its own reputation? Lately, there are lots of talks about reputation in the society as a global trend. So how is it persisted in Ukraine by Ukrainian business? So today we're going to talk about it. I hope that now we're going to turn off the music. We still hear it in the amplifiers. And I also would like to present the participants of our discussions. Vasyl Khmelnytsky, first Vice President of Ukrainian Association of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, and also the founder of KIEF. Borys Lozhkin, founder of a group, Secretary of National Investment Council, attached to the President of Ukraine. Natalia Antona, President of Naftogaz. Vyacheslav Klimov, who is the co-owner of Nova Pochta and head of the Ukrainian Entrepreneurs Union. And Alexander Gromyko, head of Ukrainian Association of Producers, founder of Saturn Company. Okay, thank you, dear participants, for joining us today. In the beginning, I wanted to offer the following, this short question, and to this I would like to get a short answer. Actually, if reputation of business and reputation of the country are associated, should business invest money into forming this reputation of the country, or should it just in its own reputation? Could you please answer shortly yes or no, and just short arguments why, maybe in 3 sentences. Borys, the floor is yours. Business should, as it seems to me, first of all invest in itself. And a successful business is the best reputation for the country. Of course, if the business is also ready to support the country, it's great. But the main thing here would be business itself. The more successful companies we have presented today at the panel, then the better would be the reputation of the country. Okay, thanks, Vitaly. I fully support such viewpoint, and I believe that business should invest into itself. Why so? Because the main goal of the business is to get additional added value and actual satisfaction for investors. If the investors are going to be happy, this is the best reputation. So they are going to share this satisfaction with other investors, and these other investors are going to invest this money into the country, because reputation means money. Okay, thank you, Vasyl. 4 words, okay? No doubt, reputation of business and the country. If it's all together, that's big capitalization of the country and business. It's an ideal solution. But it happens that reputation of business, actually, for example, if we have this securities placed to Eurobonds for 7%, and our enterprises take loans for 5%, then it means that our enterprises have better reputations than reputation of the country. But it happens vice versa, that reputation of the country is high, but business is rather weak in the country. Can it be that the business could participate in raising the profile of the country? Of course, it's possible and it's desirable, but this is a two-way street. If the country, just imagine this, that, for example, law enforcement, like prosecutor's office or security service, just refuse to work against business, and security service, I don't know, is catching spies or whatever, the police works with the gangsters, and the Verkhovna Rada works well, and the cabinet of ministers just fights the corruption. The business in this trend gets together and says, okay, now let's just join all the efforts and promote the country in reputation. This is a mutual process, because if Today we're going to deal with reputation, spend our effort and money, and the money, unfortunately, is not that efficient, that probably won't manage it. So this should be a two-way street. Okay, today we're going to talk more about it, that's for sure. Okay, Vyacheslav. Yes, Oksana, I think that it is not by chance that you've started from some last names in the program. We're talking about Nikola Tesla and everyone. But it seems to me that Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, when they started Facebook or when they launched their fantastic project, they haven't really been thinking about reputation of the US. So I think that business should do business. The more business is going to be concentrated on its own success, on its own products, its own projects, the better it is going to be. And the reputation of the country as well, where this business is located, is going to be a derivative. But what is going to be primary will be the success of business itself. Okay, thank you, Alexander. Well, you know what? Reputation for a businessman is when you allocate it somewhere abroad and you call the head of the bank and you say, okay, there is no money on my credit card, and he would just give this money to you, you buy Tesla, and then you would only drop the documents. You simply call it and it's like, I need several million for my business. And he'll already actually put it, and then the management is running around and gathers all the documents to close this arrangement or this transaction. So, of course, this is a talk show. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but this is for reputation when you are trusted. When the team trusts you, the bankers trust you, and without reputation, I mean, normal business cannot go anywhere. This is the only thing that the big business has, is reputation. And someone who believes that this is secondary, they are really mistaken. Because business is growing only in a way when the shareholders have this high reputation. Okay, that's really interesting. So how do you understand the notion of reputation? Because actually there is reputation, let's say personal one. There is reputation of employer. Then there is the reputation which is associated with social responsibility. There is also something of like a product producer, which is about quality of the project. So what do you specifically put into this notion? Okay, Mr. Khmelnytsky, we'll start with you. Look here, reputation is a little bit different from image. I mean, image is the person who's talking about it, and he's a confident expert in something. And it's for reputation, this is what you do. It's how you do it, how the partners treat you, how the management is reputation, and your actions. And actually, this is an example. We had a workshop burning down in Bila Tserkva. Our factory has a rather good reputation, and the suppliers of products, if before they would ask for advance payment, now they give the product and they say, okay, you're going to give it back when you get the situation corrected. And then those who used to buy from us, they always asked us to pay for later, and they say, okay, you have this great reputation, I know you have complicated situation, let's do the prepayment. And then we just managed to balance our financial flow. So this is reputation. And another thing, when I talked to Antonov just recently, just turns out that in his company our warehouse was insured, and I hope that Antonov has this reputation that of course we're going to get our insurance back. So reputation of a business partner, that's the main thing, right? The reputation of a business partner is the most important. Okay. The reputation among clients and the quality, and that too, and reputation among employees. Actually, reputation can be different. But I would totally agree with Vasily. The main thing would be business. What you do, what you achieve, what you do, how do you give your debts back. As a result, it forms your reputation. And one of the simplest just would be the interest rate for loans. Okay, what about reputation among your buyers, let's say, among consumers? How important is this? Well, actually, you're not going to have successful business if you're going to have bad reputation among consumers. If you are not some kind of special monopolist. And what about you, Mr. Kliman? What do you think? Well, you see here, probably we have businessmen from very different industries, so each one has their own interpretation of a reputation. For me, as a person who works at the mass market, for me it is extremely important about to have consumer's reputation, and quite probably it is dominating here over the reputation of even the owner or the. If a person buys or gets parcels on time, he or she is not really interested in the person who is behind that. As for business community, of course, they are interested. So for me, building priorities would be the quality of products, that would be reputation among consumers, that would also be reputation among the staff. Of course, here I'm kind of engaged because about service, we're a service company. So if my client doesn't like my employees or for example, they are not talking well enough of a bit, for me it is also important to have this reputation as a supplier or among the supplier, as what Vasily was saying, because in the end, this is my experience, and it shows that your suppliers and you as a supplier, that is a strategy. What kind of suppliers you have, this is going to define your success. And such things as social responsibility, I think that wouldn't be the first on the list. Okay, but here in post-Soviet countries, here and in Russia, there is this opinion that reputation is a kind of this show-off thing, because the more the business is successful, the more schemes are there, and actually I agree. But what about doing business in a transparent way? Of course, beautiful reputation, but is all this actually worth it? I think that the basics, what you were talking about, dates back from the Soviet times, and I think that it is about just deciding things by personal agreements. This is a characteristic for that society with the values that used to be cultivated during the Soviet and post-Soviet times. And of course, has different values, and in that life, those are the values of survival in any way, in any situation. So also going through that moment of cheating someone, and this has been there as well, or to bribe someone, or for example to find a way to agree on some personal relations. It seems to me that the society which we strive for, and actually this is a European society, this is oriented at openness, and it is oriented as something that we've shown to external internal investors, something that we can work with them, that we are ready to work with them, that we are ready to again give the satisfaction from his or her investments. So we have to sell ourselves to this investor. And how can we do that? As an entrepreneur, as our company, if we are not honest enough, if we are not open, and if we don't have the same values as our consumer has. So I think this is the difference. And reputation in this case, this is going to have this mimicry and going to be transformed into this open thing. What we were saying in the beginning, what the Bolsheviks were saying, to quote Lenin. So are we ready to be open? Yes, we are. Just wanted to add a little bit. Actually, business in post-Soviet countries, it started efficiently. I think there was this law on cooperation. Was it 1986? Yes, it was 1986. There was this law on cooperation adopted, and this is the beginning of legal business in Soviet Union. Before that, it wasn't business. It was just some informal and even criminal actions. So it's just 31 years of business that we have. I came to business in 1989, a bit later. But we actually now are in this It's like between youth and maturity. The standards of business in the US, in Europe, in other countries, they were formed for decades. But we are also working on the market. It's already formed. There are some rules, written and unwritten rules, and some standards. Unfortunately, I still face it, and I can still see it. Some investments that the owners of the company, they don't understand why they need international audit. Why they need to structure the company in the right way so that the investors are interested in bringing their money to them. They consider it some just extra expenses, but actually, in my own experience, these are the best contributions that you can make into your own business. Not counting the business itself, because if you have international audit, if you have correct legal structure, if you have all necessary rules and standards complied with for the business, if you have the license, the permit and all that, the cost of this business is higher, and the expenses for maintaining all this infrastructure cannot be compared with the gain that you can get, both at the expense of selling the business and also by attracting more money. You can attract them cheaper. You can attract them from Western companies. I'm sure that 5% interest rate without audit, you won't be able to attract money, right? So this is also a question of standards and rules, which in the West, anyways, public company, and this is natural practice, and it's just an exception. And therefore, Vitaly is totally right. This growth is still in the format of survival. But on the other hand, just from it again, is the best investment. We started international audit in 2005, and we never regretted it, because this enabled us to get access to the resources which we would have never gotten it otherwise.
Openness, it's not only the question of values, which is very important, but it's also the question of standards. If you would like to be successful, without this, you won't be able to succeed. I'm not talking about the startups, but the third and fourth year of life of the company will be difficult. Is it possible to build the transparent business without the leader being a public person? Mr. Gromyka, quite recently I have become a public individual, and after the revolution we started to invest into the development of production, and I understand the idea that we have to produce enough goods to overflow Europe with a label made in Ukraine, like for example, we have to transform made in China products into made in Ukraine products, and this is for the purpose for which I have created an association of the producers, and I visit a lot of Ukrainian plants, and we are helping them to attract investors. But we face a big problem, which was emphasized by Borys. People don't understand why they need the international audit. They are apprehensive of international audit because they don't understand how they can operate in the gray sector. And we say that we have 40% in the economy of the country which is working in the gray area. And these companies want to get the loans, but they don't understand that they should not operate in the gray sector like that. We have created a coalition for, de-shadization of the economy, so that the companies would obtain the international audit, and they might get the loans with the interest rates for 4.5%. But for that, they have to become absolutely transparent. But in the coalition for de-shadization, we are trying to improve the legal framework as well, because the shady economy is growing for a reason. If each business person with a good reputation is saying that I'm paying bribes, but, the situation is going to change. Well, the business has agreements between the authorities and the business. We just do not pay too much attention to you being avoiding the taxes, and that the business would not really pay too much attention to the government authorities stealing. A lot of business would say that if they pay the taxes, my competitor is going to strangle me. And another answer could be that if I pay all the taxes, the government is going to steal it. Well, that's the situation. Well, everything what I'm talking about is my conviction, and it improves my reputation, the reputation of the company, and it increases the trust of the company to the partners. And quite often people called me not Alexander Gromyko, but Alexander Saturn, because reputation and personal image are very well connected. Already, the representatives of Ukrainian business to become public and to make certain statements. Do you see that you have personal risks facing there, and maybe you will see less benefits in relation to being public? Are you ready to be public? When we meet with the foreigners, they usually, chat with you for 15 minutes. It's called small talk, and where have you been? Where did you spend your vacation? Things like that. But when I meet the business people in Ukraine, for 15 minutes, they will be scolding the government, the president, the parliament. We are complaining about life. But I am usually say that the deputies are mirroring the nation. Who is electing the president? The nation is electing the president and the councillors to the parliament. And the same stories about the business. Like 50 companies come together, and we say that we work in the official sector. But I think that not all of them are working in the official sector. There is a lot of business which is working in the gray area. And we are trying to find some loopholes. Because really, if in some sectors you are paying all the taxes, you will lose 20% of your profits. So we are looking for some ways to sort of improve the taxation system, and we have to be pushed to the transparency by the environment. We are trying to optimize the taxes. Who is ready to come to my program and to be interviewed? Who is ready to come to me and be interviewed? Antonov is. I support this idea. I would like to add a few words. And what for? What for? Just to discuss these things openly, publicly, because any emergence at the public scene should have some sense. You're not as a business person, as an entrepreneur, maybe there is some sense in it. And here I would like to focus your attention on one issue, which I believe is interesting. We are talking about the trust. We are talking about the reputation of this state, of the country, of the business, and the question arises: the reputation, in front of whom? The reputation which will be reviewed by the external world or domestic world. The reputation of the country and of the business should be maintained versus in front of the domestic investor. The domestic investor is being discriminated in this country at present because our legal framework is not perfect, and it does not allow to launch the full-fledged capital market or securities market. What is the reputation of the country which has no capital market, full-fledged capital market? It's underdeveloped country, because all the civilized countries, successful countries have their own capital markets or securities market, and one of the pillars for the economy is the domestic investor, because the domestic investor is the GDP generation of the GDP. We want the GDP to grow with the rates of 7-8%, but as long as we do not have the capital market, we are not going to be able to grow that much, because there is no linkage between the internal resources and the willingness to export the capital, and we will be always suffering from the flee of capital, and we won't be able to develop the full-fledged capital market. What should we do for that? To protect the rights of the minority investors, but every investor has to have economic incentives. What is the economic incentive to invest into the shares of some companies? There is none. Or buy the bonds of the domestic companies. There is no incentives. Why? Because if you buy the bonds of any company, domestic company, Ukrainian company, then in a certain period of time, you will pay the tax for the rate of exchange differences. The tax on the rate of exchange differences is considered to be a revenue, but in reality you haven't earned anything. But you're not going to invest into these bonds because the hryvnia is depreciated. You not only are going to lose the profit, but you will also lose the principal of your investment. And this is one of the cornerstones of the current situation, and our economy has been put upside down. It is standing on its head now. And if we address this issue, we will make the internal debt market more viable. And if we put our cooperation equal to the banks, because now we can carry out internal domestic investments only through the banks. But as soon as we put the cooperation and the banks to the same level, and when there is going to be a competition between the banks and the cooperation for the internal resources, we will resolve lots of issues. The banks will decrease the interest rates, and the credit and lending is going to revive. And they are, because the banks at present are investing the revenues into the bonds of Ukraine, and they get the refinancing for these things. What should we do? So you all represent the business associations, various business associations, and each of it is working on its own. And if you would be able to act, commonly, well, there's Mr. Antonov is representing the Fuel Association, and also is defending the de-Shadization of the economy. We have different approaches, but it's not just a small talk. We are united by the same idea to create the, so to say, official economy, and the cabinet of ministers had already voted to substitute the tax for the capital which has been exported. Not everybody wanted to do it. Even in our coalition is continuing to carry out the flight of capital into the offshores. Now we are working with the deputies of the parliament, and they are ready to promote the idea of de-Shadization. 7142 law, for example, it makes the big stores to work as an entity, but not like a conglomerate of the private physical entrepreneurs. We are really suffering as the producers. It's difficult for us to work in this market because we have to compete with the smugglers, because the smuggled items are being sold in the big supermarkets, and actually they can report on it because they are operating as the small entrepreneurs, physical persons. So this law, draft law, requires to show the source of origin of the goods. So in this coalition for de-Shadization of the economy, well, people really argue. A lot of people say that de-Shadization will kill the small businesses, but we are talking about the large stores, but not small trading, kiosks. And our stakeholders not always have the same opinion. But now we are trying to move our idea forward. We would like the populism, which is demonstrated by the deputies of the parliament, should be cooled down a little bit so that they vote for this law. We have these gaps in the legal framework. Well, because a lot of the traders cannot really report where they have obtained the products they are selling. And we have a lot of companies who are so-called gray importers. And it's true that the business is uniting into coalitions. We are being heard. And, well, business people are amalgamating into different associations. Why different associations? It depends on the interest, because there is big business, small business. There is European Business Association, which unites the foreign companies. And usually these are the interests of the importing companies importers. There are interests of the Ukrainian manufacturers because they are different. There is an example of Spanish business which united to change a certain general reputation of the Spanish business. Whether we can borrow this experience in Sweden they have developed the brand from the state. Whether this story is possible in Ukraine, yeah, I think it is possible. Maybe the biggest problem of Ukraine is the following. You know, we have a saying that wherever there are three Ukrainians, there are three leaders. But business demonstrates the similar attitude. If we are talking about the Ukrainian business, it is true that we have to unite and lobby their interests jointly and speak in one voice. I would like to go back to the publicity. Now you are on the public side. And please, could you tell us how are you going to strengthen the reputation of your successful business in the nearest future? Mr. Klimov, could you share with us your successful business plans? First of all, we, as a service company, and everything we do is directed at improvement of provision of these services to our clients. And innovations and some new approaches which are going to be felt by our consumers is our root advantage. And in November, at the end of November, we are going to open the biggest in Ukraine a sorting center, which is sorting out the packages which are delivered by mail. It is a huge building. Maybe you already see it before it is being inaugurated. It's located in not far from Zhylyane. You can see our corporate colors next to the airport of Zhylyane. And this is a huge building, 25,000 square meters area, with the most modern in the Eastern Europe sorting system. And most probably this is a novelty we are ready to demonstrate. It is operating already. Its official inauguration is going to happen at the end of November, and this is where I would like to go back to a couple of questions which were raised before, dealing with reputation and dealing with getting the loans. Such objects and such investments, well, it is impossible to build such a facility without multi-million investments, and that's natural. One can be whatever generator of cash. One can be happy monthly to obtain sacks of grivnas to get, or maybe you might actually measure your profit by kilos of grivna. But when one is growing to the scale of the national company, and all of a sudden one finds out that the infrastructure of this company defines your further development. Just to do one's business, it is necessary to develop the infrastructure. And all of a sudden one realizes that this unofficial money, black money, about which you were so happy yesterday, and you could one could buy the villa, the Seychelles Islands, or very expensive watch, but this unofficial money doesn't cost anything, because it is impossible to buy a land plot paying this unofficial money. One cannot start construction if one comes to the international supplier, which supplies the best sorting systems in the world. This supplier would not understand where this money is from. And this supplier would not accept the money as the payment for the equipment. If one has a reputation of a business which is not paying the debts, repaying the loans, nobody's going to issue a loan to such a business. If the company has not been audited, as Borys said, nobody's going to talk to this company in the banks. And this is where the chain of disillusionment starts. The disillusionment of the businesses which decided at a certain point of time to keep the revenues in an unofficial money. At that moment, this money becomes a threat to the company, and the individual starts to understand that all the previous work was wasted. That's why the transparency of the business, the cleanliness of the transactions is capitalized if the individual reaches a certain level and wishes to continue developing. If an individual wants to work in the paradigm of being able to buy whatever, because one's pockets are full of banknotes, well, this is a road to nowhere. Mr. Khmelnytsky, would you share your plans? Well, Klimo was talking about 2 tons of black money. I would like to try to buy something for these monies. I think that this is an ideal situation, but at present there is a case when the cat is looking into the mirror and sees the lion. Well, this is an ideal option, but so at present in Ukraine, the cash is really turning over in Ukraine, and people are selling equipment for cash. And using cash, one can buy the equipment cheaper. Yeah, well, the state has to change the rules of the game, and these rules are going to be open, and we will abide by these rules. But nevertheless, we are going to compete with each other, and we will be looking at some loopholes. But if people are working in an official sector, they have to be responsible for them. But it should be profitable for the business to work an official sector, but we have to earn some profits. We are ready to unite. We have different companies, but we can always find a joint language, a common language. The small companies are quite efficient, and we are ready to unite if we see the goal. What about your business plans? I don't believe into construction at present, and
actually I'm really skeptical about the malls, hotels, and now we are in the conditions when people can earn money and not spend it. You have place to spend, but not where to earn. So I'll be building factories and plants. I want to create a platform, and I think that in the nearest year we're going to build 5 factories, and we still have some developments. We'll do that ourselves, because I want to show, this is my main idea, that the country can grow if we are going to build plants in Ukraine, if you're going to pay good salary, if people are just going to buy more of these products, and this is how they're going to move the economy. And of course, I was saying that today that actually Ford raised their salary double for their work, so they could buy cars. It's good because people earn more and they spend more. So actually you have to make opportunity for people to earn, and you also have to have products supplied both to the country and abroad. I mean, we're a very competitive country. We can make products cheaply and efficiently. Okay, Mr. Antonov, business plans. Our business plans, we constantly think about accelerating our business processes and how do you make the life of our consumer better and easier. We introduce these new technologies, and like we introduce QR code, when you come to the gas station, you don't need to go inside, you just take a photo, you enter several numbers, and then you just get as much fuel as you need. Or, for example, just something. As for new technologies, we're also looking on the superchargers. And actually, it is not in a mass thing, but at least just these electric gas stations, only those which are going to be oriented at electric cars. And believe me, they have their own specifics, so they also need certain technologies, the technology of client service, the speed, convenience, everything that makes our life easier. And as for production, our holding also includes an enterprise for producing bread, for example. This Khrebprom. We are constantly increasing the investments into its technological things, and actually we are moving towards contemporary types of bread, at least those which are now cultivated in Europe. We are moving away from the old standards, even though the old standards of baking actually are not that efficient and they are not as delicious, but they say that at least they're very healthy. So we're still preserving those, but still we're moving forward in this direction. As for different directions, such as agriculture trading, that's a new topic for us. So we are, last year, we actually sold about 500,000 tons of grain. That's also an achievement for us because this is a rather big volume there, and we have sold it, according to a forward program. So we gave fuel and the system of plant protection and also fertilizers for our producers. So for the farmers and everyone, and all actually performed all their 100% of everything, and actually they gave these products back to us and we exported them successfully. So these are the directions that we're investing in, what we're looking at. You are talking about the development of business and about new enterprises, even about new plants. But now I would like to discuss the following story with you. According to state statistics, we have 42 million people. The experts say that this is increased, probably is 40 million, even less. Out of those, 12 million are retired. At least our Prime Minister is saying it now during the pension reform ongoing. About 7 million children, so minors. If we subtract all that, we have 21 million people. And according to the latest data from the World Bank, 7 million have left to earn money abroad. So we have just 14 million in the most optimistic scenario. Are you going to have people to work? Aren't you afraid that people are just going to leave the country? Okay, Mr. Grumikov, start from you. Thank you. Actually, during the last plan discussion, I was saying that yes, we do have this problem and it does exist. In Cherkasy, we launched the first part of our plant. The electric envelopes, the stoves, and the ovens. This is not complicated production; it's just process. Now, of course, we don't have this full cycle in KIEF. There's all just small equipment like fans and. But the second plant is very big. We launched a big plant to produce fridges, and only its area is 50,000 square meters. So having launched the first part of the convectors, it's just like 200 people we took and employed, because actually in the fridges plant we're going to have to 1,000 people working. We're already installing the equipment, so we're going to launch it in February, and we just face this problem. Because the fact that, first of all, there are no experts, people just don't know how to work with this process. The Cherkasy is the regional center, and B, we did take some people in from different regions, so we really had to do that. And actually, this month we had some of them leaving for Poland to earn money. Of course, competing with Polish salaries, if we could raise this for them, and then we had to raise for the others. That's all. One thing leads to the other. Actually, it's a really sad story that we have to compete with the other. That is not between ourselves, because in China the salary was $50, and the Chinese people actually thought that it would always work. 1,000 people could be brought by an insurance. We had $150 of salary. The years have passed, and in China it's $600 is like the minimal salary, but here is 150, well, maybe 200. I'm talking about regular workers. $200, so that's 3 times less than they have in China, but they're competing between each other. So from a factory would take the employees, and therefore the level of life is growing and the salaries are growing. Unfortunately, we have this problem here that we don't compete between ourselves. Unfortunately, for now, we don't have that many investors. Even Cherkasy, people governors, like, we hope that people would follow you, like we're involved in the Austrians packaging and everything. There's something we're going to do for ourselves and for everyone, like an associate position. So we just involve someone to create the cluster of suppliers and to supply something, because we're actually making clothes of Chinese plants. This is big real plants which are not in any way different from the Chinese ones. So this problem exists. But a bigger problem is it's not about people, it's about qualifications. So that is why we need, well, as for our Minister of Education and everything, like we don't have the necessary specialties in our universities and in our colleges which are necessary for the market. So there is a discrepancy between what is there on the market and what is actually there is a need for it. Like even now in Cherkasy, in the colleges we introduced new departments, and it is the Chinese who train. We took Chinese people who teach our people to work on this process, and actually we have arranged that they are going to teach their students to the special student needed. Yeah, that's a great initiative, Mr. Lozhkin. In Ukraine there is a big advantage which has become an advantage. Salaries in Ukraine lower than in China. Therefore, people, also thanks to the visa-free regime, more and more of them just leave to earn money elsewhere. Plus, the export potential is very high, so we really can produce cheap. But the disadvantage, we've been looking into a project about buying, producing, and then building some more. And it's interesting, very, very efficient export production, but at that, we're asking why we only work in one shift. I mean, you can do it in 2 or 3 shifts, and they're like, we can't find people for the second shift, and this is a very serious challenge. And here, really, business should get together, and somehow they have to react to this challenge, including the development of education and raising salaries, so in different ways. Okay, Mr. Khmelnytsky, you were just remembering Ford, who was saying that there is a need for supporting your employer. Okay, about the reputation of the employer, this is what I wanted to ask. How hard it is now to... Okay, let me just come back to this issue now, because actually I'm afraid that people are leaving now. It's just like not the regular people leaving, the talented people leaving. During the last forum in Canada about education, one of the biggest panel discussions was how do you attract talents into the country and what do they attract them from? And you have to decide that they take it from us, because the most talented people leave. Like there are about 5,000 people in IT people, but they're not just students, they're the super professionals. And moreover, they also take the whole teams, like the whole team. A startup appears and they give the super conditions and they go abroad. But the last tendency, I have this, actually, we train this talented child for free, and in the end, for the graduation, he was given this study abroad at Stanford, and counting that they would come back to the plant. But he just called in 2 weeks and said, you know what, I have to refuse, because 25 best the winners of the Olympiads on for biology was taken to Stanford. The program was given with regard to working, yes, in the States, you know, so not an expert, even children who are talented. I mean, the world is hunting for those, and we have to do something really extraordinary, because we're really talented people. We have to apply our knowledge here. That's why I'm really concerned, because we might have only tried people left here. When I'm told that in the nearest future there's going to be robots, my friend is saying, okay, you know what, I hope that they come to Europe so that our engineers come back to our country. And I mean, this is really a problem. Okay, this is going to be some time, and in the future, about 3 times a day now we open a fridge to find something to eat. But actually now they are discussing the last speech by Alibaba head, who at the Bloomberg Forum actually said that the government shouldn't be looking into the creating the workplaces classic enterprise, because already in the past. And all jobs are going to be created in service industry, because There's artificial intelligence, IT technology. So I understand that for now it's not about Ukraine, right? Okay, just to continue. I've been reading this small lecture before business. It was 3 weeks ago, and I was sent 4 films about Jack Ma. He was saying that, the future is not for jobs, and I just wanted to explain. I think it was at 3 a.m. somebody was sending it. Normally I sleep during this time. And there is a locomotive, a train in the world. And there are maybe 50 to 60 countries, maybe $10,000 of income. There is Jack Ma or Bill Gates. They are somewhere ahead. And of course, they are moving the economy very fast. But here, I think the income per capita is like 2,000, right? We are not in the last carriage. We are somewhere, we're just running after the train, let's say. We have to build our products, and we have to sell something that doesn't demand in the world. It's like, let's not make fridges or whatever. Let's do innovations. But what would innovations mean? Innovations is when a business or a company orders a product and they do it all together, and this is very efficient, this innovation. Then it can be sold in the world as well. But this is the connection of business cooperation with IT that's all together, and this is impossible to be jumping over. So when we're going to run after this train, we'll sit into the last carriage, and we finally get to the first carriage. Then we're going to think, how do we fly on Mars, or do blockchains, or some new super technologies. And for now, I would just stop on the fact that we have to create these new jobs. We have to build plants, of course. We have to be contemporary and grown up to them. Well, actually, Ukrainian potential is very big, especially. This is production, and a robot is highly technological, innovative, but then you have to look at this direction. Agriculture is not just land, it's also the drones that allow us to better collect the crops, and also the robots. Now in England there is a company which has managed to collect the crops from the field without using people, except the remote operators. I think it was they were 100 kilometers from this place, so they managed the robots which collected the crops. So what prevents Ukraine from producing all this? And those, accumulator batteries for mosques, where there's going to be huge demand. And we have lithium deposits in Ukraine. So production, I think, is going to stay, and it's going to be different and more complicated and simple one. Can I just add that when robots come, we are going to produce robots. I'm sure that Gromyko in his production is going to make robots instead of fridges, the most contemporary ones. It's not going to be that hard. If we have this documentation, we'll do it in a year. Yes, the Chinese people will do it. Okay, Mr. Antonov, the floor is yours. I think that working in this direction, by creating this industry, we still have a lot of things to do, because the economy is a raw material economy, and the production itself, the structure of our export. This production is located in other countries, so we have to find production, just more technological ones, and make it in our place. And nobody just cancel the law that where the goods are produced and processed, that's where there's added value, and this added value also increases GDP. Therefore, it just increases capitalization of the country. Mr. Klimov, look here. Actually, it seems to me that Ukrainian business, probably just like Ukrainian authorities, they have simply haven't seen this problem. I'm talking about not just the brain drain, but also the drain of working hands. They started talking about this problem only this year, when visa-free regime was open. Suddenly, everyone became aware that they don't have people they can put behind the cashier's desk or put next to the conveyor belt. It seems to me that this is a good challenge. It is a good challenge, which, if we, Ukrainian entrepreneurs, dealt with it strategically, we would have started to be preparing for a long time. I mean, it was all coming to it. This is also about efficiency, including financial efficiency. Why? I mean, why does Ukrainian business, why did it use manual labor? Because it was cheaper. And actually, this evolution was already made by China when just 10 years ago or 15 years ago, for example, the mobile phone things and the company which made this mobile phone, but it looked like a huge hangar where thousands of people sat and using aerosols and wearing face masks, they would put paint on these shells. This is how a standard Chinese plant looked. No matter what they did, this is how it looked. So what happened afterwards? As the production was too big, as there were too many orders, this manual labor had to be replaced by conveyors, robots, whoever. But even around us, there is a huge amount of operations which are done now by the people. And suddenly we actually became aware that they are done by the people, but nobody understands why. Why it is done by the people? Why can't it be replaced by machines? Why we need people who work with the parking if you could just put a parkment? We are totally convinced that, for example, the process of issuing a parcel can be simplified, and you can do it through an automated machine. And moreover, we are already doing it. I mean, you can already see there are some postmats in malls when there is no operator. And very soon we're just going to make an automated post offices where there's not going to be a single person. You just come there, you'll open the door to this room with the QR code from your card or from your mobile phone, most probably. And you'll communicate using a mobile app, and you'll open the door of your safe box, and you will get your parcel. So this challenge, of course, is very hard for Ukrainian business, and actually, in the end, it's going to make us change. It's going to make us become much more efficient than we used to be before.
And secondly, the operations where people really are needed. So we are going to pay more attention to the people. Well, somehow we forgot to pay attention to the people because the people were abandoned in this country, but everything was resolved through the wages. But at present, we will have to build corporate universities. In each business, we will have to create a very specific, forecasted careers so that people who come from the university and they would understand that if they work well in 20 or 15 years from now, this individual would be able to become a CEO of the company. It will make us to look at not personnel but our employees, to pay attention to them and to consider them as an asset and to understand that this is the most important asset. And a similar attitude will be generated towards engineers, not only the workers but also engineers. And if we do that, we will be able to live through this period, and then people will come back from the Western countries back to Ukraine. Believe me, people who were leaving to the Western countries, to Poland, to work as workers will come back here having 10,000 euro, which was worn there, and they will open small businesses, services, restaurants, and they will be the traders of the new spiral of growth. I'd like to turn our discussion into the following plane. You have a very successful business. You are strong leaders, but a lot of people now are looking looking at new sites. They are looking to the West. The reputation of the successful business which exists in one's own country. Is it possible to export this product? Whether this product, which is successful here, is it going to be similarly successful outside this country? I have 3 examples, quite recent ones. First of all, we have we've started to do our business in Georgia and Moldova. It happened 18 to 24 months ago. The companies now have strengthened there. They started to generate profit. In Georgia, we are the leaders of the market among the private companies. In Moldova, we are on one of the 3. And when we were doing that, well, actually, there was a very serious discussion. What sort of brand are we going to use? How are we going to look like in Georgia? We were thinking for a long time. We were trying to write the word Nova Poshta in Georgian, but it looked kind of complex. And also logo, yeah, it's N letter. So the discussions were quite tough. And then we decided that we are going to enter those markets as a Ukrainian company whose name is Nova Poshta. There was not a single client who would not work with us because we were a Ukrainian company. No, not a single client refused to work with us, neither in Georgia nor in Moldova, who would be asking, what does the word Nova Poshta mean? Why Nova Poshta? But these are Ukrainian words, not a single person, because finally everything was defined by the quality of the service and by the people who were working in those outlets. And I believe that especially in Georgia or in Moldova, in the countries which traditionally have friendly relations with Ukraine, well, the company generated a lot of interest. And they knew in these countries that we are the drivers for e-commerce. And there were no doubts about us entering the market with these logos and this name. As far as the European countries are concerned, we have signed a contract with the 2nd largest company in Europe for express deliveries. It includes investment of La Poste, of the state operator of France. It's a European monster. And they also didn't put a single question. They consider Ukraine is the country with 40+ million population, and they have to be present here. And they selected the leader in this market, but we selected the leader of the European market. We became partners, and within the framework of these negotiations, which we carried out for 6 months, there was no issue raised which was related to our, nationality. And as I've mentioned at the beginning, the most important thing is a product and service which the company delivers. If the business is properly done, if the proper people are employed in one's company, I think the nationality doesn't matter. But there is a brand of the country, of the state. Well, that's important. Applaud. Mr. Gromyko, the question is to you. Your product, you were selling it. Yeah, it was made in China. And now you already started to market as made in Ukraine. Is it's advantage or disadvantage? Well, in Russia it has become a disadvantage, and that's quite understandable. Even in Belarus, we are investing now into a small production, assembly production. And we are going to brand it as made in Belarus because the market is big. We closed the company, our enterprise there, and unfortunately, there is no loyalty to the Ukrainian products due to the political reasons. But in Poland, the loyalty is high. It's easy to trade in the next. Now we are selling in Ashan and Cash and Carry, and Saturn is being sold very successfully there. And people people treat made in Ukraine much better. Now Ukraine is a European country, and we are branding, we are marking as that made in Europe. We cannot write made in EU, but we can write made in Europe and made in Ukraine, and the people demonstrate much more loyal attitude to this brand in Ukraine, and even in Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary. Well, people treat the made in Ukraine label very loyal, in a very loyal manner. Everything which surrounds us, a lot of being manufactured in China, and now our workforce is less expensive than in China. But there is another advantage we have. Not everyone pays attention to this advantage, but we are already in the European Union from the point of view of the supplies. We supply it without customs duties. So in terms of commodity supplies, we are already in the European Union. Well, some people are saying that it is difficult to get to that market, but if one is constructing a modern plant, well, you have to maintain high standards of the production. Well, I have been a trader always. I was supplying the goods for the last 20 years. But when we became the producers, we are not interested in assembly. We just hired Chinese engineers, and they have actually created a business plan for us. And we compete with Chinese in the external markets. And to win them in the European markets, we have to provide the Chinese costs, and we have created a clone of the Chinese company. Competition there is very high, and they pay $600 to the workers. It's going to increase. The living standards have increased, and the young people, they all want to become lawyers and economists, and the problems are similar to us. So the workforce is a problem there. So we have a huge opportunity to win the European markets. Well, in a lot of positions, no matter what we produce, the furniture or the light fixtures, it is possible to produce them in Ukraine and to export them. But it's important to create the conditions for the investors so that they would come to us. But when the Turkish company, which wanted to cooperate with us, understood how the internal market works and how the competitors are not paying the taxes, and what about the supplies, this Jewish grape wine is operating, and people learn about it. It's easy to read about it. A lot is being written in Ukraine, in English language including, and they all read about it. And the raiding happens because we have a big sector of the economy in the shade. So if we resolve the issue of the grey economy sector, we will be able to get investments in the country, create a hub here, and we will be able to see the label made in Ukraine on a lot of goods and commodities. Mr. Khmelnytsky, you were nodding. Does the reputation of Ukraine does not help to do business? Unfortunately not. Today I was participating in the investment panel, and three key things were raised there. I met for the last 2 years with 100 companies, and I wanted to invite them to produce goods in Ukraine. And Alexander said that the labor is cheap here, but I am not using it because the inexpensive workforce means that the population is destitute. It's not the way to decrease the costs. It is necessary to improve the efficiency of the production. I was asking about the reputation of Ukraine and to what extent it helps. Yeah, there is a problem, an issue, because a lot of our politicians and civil servants are traveling all over the world and are saying that there is war in this country, that there is an aggression, and people do not understand where is KIEF and where is Lozhkin and where is Lviv. They really believe that the country presents a high risk. 12 months ago, Chinese came to this country. They were carrying out a forum here. There were 120 business people, and one of them came to the podium and said, only the strongest Chinese came here because they are not afraid to die. And, well, actually, it demonstrated that they didn't understand this situation. In Israel, the war is waged all the time, but they are always telling the investors, don't be afraid, we have good investment climate. We do have corruption, we have to combat it, everybody understands it, but we somehow are pushing it everywhere. Everybody talks about corruption. The civil servants came, the business people came, and they keep saying corruption, 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 corruption. And I've been at the investment forum in Poland, and there was a special panel dedicated to corruption to Ukraine. I would like to see the panel where they would discuss the opportunities which Ukraine gives. So we have to position ourselves differently. We have to say that we are open to the business. We are going to protect investors, that we are going to diminish the risks. There should be the joint program of positioning this country abroad. Mr. Antonov, what do you think? What's the role of the business? Can business do something to change the reputation of the country in the eyes of the investors? If we go back to the reputation of the state, I think we have to look at two elements which are interconnected: domestic investors and international investors. If we respect domestic investors and external investors going to respect us. If we don't respect our domestic investor, the physical persons, specific ones who have no opportunity to invest in Ukraine, but they would like to do it and they want to do it. And this is a lot of money. There are lots of money which are kept outside the banking sector. And the country is deteriorating its reputation because they are cheating the investors and they don't give an opportunity to earn money. But the companies are attracting funds from outside this country, the credit-worthy companies. And all the paradigm of our thinking is around the external investor, foreign investor. But in the successful investors, there is a certain ratio which is being monitored, the ratio between the domestic and external investors. We are talking about the corruption. Should there be no corruption? Can we imagine that there is no corruption at all? What will happen? We would not have domestic entrepreneurs as such, because the Western capital is just waiting the transparent conditions for doing business, and then there is no corruption. They will just flood the country and they will buy everything which is possible to buy, and there will be no internal entrepreneurs. So to a certain phase, corruption is this deterring factor. It's a deterrence. In the transition period, the corruption is playing a certain role, positive or negative, but it's stabilizing role in terms of strengthening the national capital. It played a role. And the national capital was born. Now we have to make it possible for the national investor, domestic investor, to operate. And when the corruption is going to be combated, there will be the balance between the domestic investments and the international investors. If we forget about the domestic investor, and the state will not position itself as a state which gives an opportunity to make money for the internal investors, domestic investors, they will fled the country. It's not only the hands drain, but it's also brain drain, it's capital drain, and actually it's disintegration of the state. That's why all these processes are interrelated, and the state has to work in these two directions. We should not overestimate the foreign investors only, but we have to focus on the domestic investors. If we create proper conditions for investments of physical persons who will be able to invest into the bonds of the best companies, then the capital market, the stock market will be strengthened, and the corruption will be eliminated, and the Western capital will come here, but on different conditions, because the external capital is expensive for us. The companies like MHP or Kernel, we know they have attracted $500 million each at 7-8%, and at the same time in the West the real interest rates are low. It's 2% only, but nobody is lending here at 2% interest. Why? And look how much money is being attracted by the banks. At present, Raiffeisen Bank pays very low interest rate, but it attracts lots of deposits, and they issue the loans at high rates. So this is a disbalance, because the domestic investor has no opportunity to use its right to earn the money inside the country. But at the same time, our corporations have no opportunity to use the internal investment market. They cannot rely on us. But if we change this situation, turn it around, the country is going to change drastically. Mr. Lozhkin, I absolutely agree with what Vitaly said, but we should not forget that in the world, a huge financial the Euro Central Bank printed 3 trillion, and there is a lot of money. Money supply is huge, and we should use this money. If we don't do that, it will be not appropriate. At present, tens of billions of dollars could be attracted to Ukraine, and we have to work on that as well. So ideal result is when we are implementing the program which was put on the table by Antonov, and simultaneously attract the foreign investments. And we really need that money, because we need it for the balance of payment support and also to quickly implement the projects in Ukraine. So we have to remember about the importance of the foreign investments as well. I'd like to give an opportunity to put some questions from the audience. If you have the questions, please raise your hands. If you have no questions and we gave you exhaustive information, I would like to give a special option to Mr. Klimov. I'm going to improvise. Before I left for this forum, I recalled that a couple of weeks ago we have published a great book by a great manager. It was written by Jack Welch, the famous ex-CEO of General Electric, and this book has a very symbolic name, a winner. It was published in Russian many years ago, not in Ukraine, and we didn't like the fact that it has never been published in Ukrainian language and in Ukraine. That's why our company has published this book in Ukrainian, and I think that it will be very symbolic if during this panel, we would present the book, The Winner, and I would like to give this book as a present to the great businessmen who are sitting on this stage, on this podium.
And while Mr. Klimov gives these books, that's an unexpected option for us, but I think it is a great idea. Okay, are there any questions from the audience? We have a mic. Okay, thanks. Well, if the questions were so exhaustive now, in the end, I just would like to have this short, please, question. Here we have lots of practitioners, people who came to listen to the successful leaders. Could you maybe not give your recommendation, but at least your vision? We've been talking a lot about investing today. What kind of directions you now believe the most promising? Where you would invest your own money? Where you would recommend to invest into? Which are the directions to actually make your business successful and this country successful? Mr. Khmelnytsky, let's start from you. I would like to thank him for this book, actually, my favorite manager. And he's saying that the best quality of a person is passion, being passionate. And I wish everyone to be passionate and assistant. That's the way to success. Where I would invest my money? Quite probably in processing of agricultural products. We're an agricultural country. We should move away from supplying raw materials and then they make products and return finished products to us. I'm sure that we can process it here and actually give it to the whole world. So that's what I would do. Okay, thank you. Yes. Mr. Gromyka, your turn. Well, of course, I'm already investing in production of our own household appliances. Those 60 plants that used to be the suppliers of Saturn, I want to bring them to Ukraine, as I said. So it is just full-fledged assembly for the fridges and all that. A3 Plus in Ukraine. And of course, the plant itself. We got a grant from EBRD for energy saving. We have these warm floors and solar batteries, then also solar panels, then also heat pumps and the fridges, which have the most modern type. We also want to produce electronics for shop. We're also doing it, of course, except our Saturn brand. So where I would invest? Personally in household appliances, and we're going to do it in the nearest 5 years. Our business plan is to do it for many tens of millions of dollars. And actually, the advice that I have now, I'm speaking as the head of Producers Association. But now, actually, probably the most processing, you go to this epicenter hypermarket and you simply look at everything that is not produced in Ukraine. From any construction materials and to somewhere there is sand and construction materials, we have to produce it all in Ukraine. Why would you bring it from Poland, Turkey or China and then up to any appliance like maybe accessories for soap or whatever, all these plastic and metal things, it is not hard to produce them all in Ukraine. We have to change made in China in the supermarkets, not just in our own supermarkets, but also up to Portugal, over the whole Europe to made Ukraine. This is very promising. This is going to give result and we'll get good profits. I'm convinced. As the head of Producer Association, we already have some vivid examples here which sell 100 or 80 countries of the world and they immediately come to the shelf. So I believe this is the most promising. Okay, thank you. Can I add here agriculture and Saturn as well? Okay, great. Mr. Antonov. I think that my idea, I'm also stopping on these two positions that will be on business about food. It's going to be there all the time. It's really as an eternal business. And the second thing would be technologies which presently arrive. That's energy technologies, first of all, in my understanding, and technologies for energy. I mean, it's not tomorrow, today is tomorrow. And I was saying everything about electric machines and all that. This is something we're really interested in. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Klimov. Okay, well, here everybody was too critical about robots, but we are going to invest into automation, robotization, first of all for the processes. And we are also an operational business which has this great amount of transactions, and actually there is no alternative another way. So the parcels are going to be sorted by robots, and the machines will give them to you. The delivery of this not really accessible things, of course, is going to be by drones. And there is no future in this. This is the present. This is simply the nearest present, I would say. And that's why I think that you are going to know for sure. There's going to be a different company maybe in several years. And it is going to be very digital, is going to be really automated. And where we still need smiles, there's going to be people smiling. Okay, thank you. Mr. Lozhkin? Well, first of all, I would invest in everything about expert, because in this way, we are kind of insuring ourselves from the risks of grivna. Then, of course, robots and drones, even though I believe that this is among the directions which actually in Ukraine could become a driver for the future. Of course, IT, which is now actually the third sector by size in Ukrainian export. And yes, I would also buy something from Anton. And the most important thing, I would invest into something I believe. It may be household appliance, it may be services, it may be expert or anything. But if you really believe in this business, this is the most important thing. If you believe, that means that you are going to achieve that result. Okay, thank you. Well, you know, there are people, you talk to them and you feel that you are kind of charged. And I already see these people next to me, and thanks to them a lot, we talk to the people who have the reputation of people who are doing this country, but not with words, but with deeds. Thank you.